Welcome to AGS Stories. Grab your favorite drink, settle in, and get ready for a roller coaster of emotions with today's jaw-dropping tale. Picture this. A devoted grandma who's been the backbone of her son's family finds herself unexpectedly iced out by her daughter-in-law. Why? Because her unwavering generosity is now seen as a bad influence. But this grandma isn't about to back down. She's standing her ground, even if it means cutting off financial support, leaving her daughter-in-law scrambling to pay the kids' school fees. What's really going on here? Stick around to find out. It's a story of family drama, resilience, and tough love you won't want to miss. I'm Angela, a 58-year-old widow who's recently found herself entangled in a family mess that's been brewing for months. My son, Jason, has been married to a woman named Rachel for 10 years. Together, they have two beautiful boys, Ethan, who's 8, and Caleb, who's 6. Jason had always been a responsible, hard-working man, and just before the pandemic, he and Rachel bought their dream home. But when COVID-19 hit, Jason lost his job, and everything spiraled downhill. Rachel has been a stay-at-home mom since Ethan was born. She's always said she planned to go back to work once Caleb started school, but here we are, years later, and I haven't seen any sign of that happening. I don't mind stepping in to help. They're my family, after all. Over the years, I've paid for everything from their mortgage to the boys' private school tuition. I even contributed the down payment for their house. I never saw this as a burden. I love my grandsons deeply and wanted to make sure they had every opportunity in life. But lately, I've begun to feel like my efforts aren't appreciated, least of all by Rachel. In fact, her behavior toward me has turned cold, and I can't help but wonder if my generosity has somehow become a problem for her. Until a few months ago, Ethan and Caleb would spend weekends at my house at least once a month. They loved playing in the yard, feeding the chickens, and helping me bake cookies. It brought me so much joy to see them laugh and run around in nature. But now, it's been months since I've seen them. Every time I try to arrange a visit, Rachel comes up with an excuse. The boys have schoolwork. They have a swimming competition. They're tired from the drive. At first, I thought it was just life getting in the way. But as the excuses piled up, I began to feel something more deliberate was happening. Whenever I asked if I could visit them instead, Rachel would shut me down with reasons that felt increasingly absurd. The house was too messy. They had plans with her family. They wanted a quiet weekend. It felt like she was pushing me out of their lives, and it hurt deeply. I tried talking to Jason about it, but he always shrugged it off, saying, "Rachel's just overwhelmed," or "things are busy." The breaking point came when Ethan called me out of the blue. His small voice trembled with excitement as he told me how much he missed me and wanted to come over. I was overjoyed, until I realized he was calling me in secret. When I asked if his parents knew, he hesitated and quickly hung up. My heart shattered. What kind of environment had Rachel created where my own grandson felt like he couldn't openly talk to me? I sent Jason and Rachel a message that evening, explaining what happened and asking if everything was okay. The response I got the next day shook me to my core. Rachel sent a long email accusing me of manipulating Ethan and undermining their parenting. She called me a bad influence and said she didn't want me spoiling the boys with materialistic nonsense. Her words were cruel and completely out of line. I had always respected their boundaries and only ever wanted to give the boys love and support. When Jason came by later that week to pick up the monthly check, I confronted him. "Jason," I asked, "why does Rachel think I'm a bad influence? Why is she keeping me from my grandsons?" His face turned red as he tried to deflect, but eventually, the truth came out. Rachel was jealous. She thought the boys enjoyed spending time with me more than they did with her. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could a mother be jealous of her children's bond with their grandmother? I told Jason that Rachel's insecurities were hurting the entire family, but he just shrugged, saying, "You know how she is. I don't want to make things worse." That was the moment I realized Jason wasn't going to stand up for me or for himself. I couldn't take it anymore. The next time Jason came asking for money, I told him, "No more." I explained that if Rachel was so adamant about cutting me out of their lives, then my financial support would end too. He tried to argue, saying I was being unfair and that the boys shouldn't suffer because of our conflict. But I stood firm. "If Rachel wants me out of their lives, then I'm out completely," I said. "You can't have my money if you can't respect me as part of this family." Over the following months, I heard through the grapevine that Rachel was telling everyone I was trying to control them with my money. Meanwhile, Jason was working 2 jobs just to keep up with the bills, and Rachel still hadn't gone back to work. When Jason showed up again, this time asking for help with credit card debt, I asked him point blank, "Has Rachel apologized yet?" He avoided eye contact and mumbled something about how she's stubborn. I refused to give in. It's been nearly 6 months since I cut them off financially. The boys have been transferred to a public school, and Jason still struggles to make ends meet. Rachel, however, continues to splurge on luxuries, proving her priorities lie elsewhere. I've started focusing on myself, volunteering at a local community center, and spending time with friends who truly value me. It hasn't been easy, but I'm learning to let go of the guilt. I hope that one day, when Ethan and Caleb are older, they'll seek me out, and I'll be able to explain everything. Until then, I'm holding on to the belief that I deserve respect and love, just like anyone else. Family drama can cut deep, especially when it stems from misunderstandings and insecurities. But sometimes, standing up for yourself is the only way to heal. For anyone else going through something similar, know your worth. You deserve to be treated with kindness and respect, no matter what. It's clear you've gone above and beyond for Jason and his family, not just financially, but emotionally as well. Your love and dedication shine through in everything you've done, and it's heartbreaking to see Rachel pulling away and creating such distance. It's understandable to feel hurt and even question if this is part of a deliberate effort to push you out. However, there may be deeper insecurities at play here. Rachel's actions might stem from feelings of inadequacy or jealousy, especially given how much the boys adore you. This doesn't excuse her behavior, but it does provide some context. Perhaps it's worth having a direct and honest conversation with Jason to express your feelings and ask him to step up. You've shown incredible strength, and standing firm while advocating for a fair relationship with your grandsons is the right path forward. After that sleepless night, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions, anger, sadness, and a deep sense of betrayal. Rachel's reaction to me spending time with Ethan and Caleb felt absurd and cruel. How could she not understand that my intentions were purely out of love? Disneyland wasn't about outshining her, it was about creating joyful memories for my grandsons. And yet, here I was, branded as some manipulative villain in her story. The next few days were tense. I tried to keep myself busy on the farm, but every time I saw the toys or books the boys had left behind from their last visit, my heart ached. The silence was unbearable. Jason, as expected, was no help. His peacekeeper personality meant he avoided confrontation at all costs, even if it meant sacrificing my relationship with my grandsons. About a week later, Jason came by the house again. He looked exhausted, his usual confident demeanor replaced by a defeated slump. I could tell he was here for something, but I wasn't in the mood for games. "Mom, Rachel's under a lot of stress," he started. I cut him off before he could continue. "Jason, enough about Rachel's stress. What about mine? What about the fact that your boys are being kept from me for no valid reason? Don't you see what's happening here?" My voice cracked, and for the first time I saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes. He sighed. "I don't know what to do. She thinks the boys are getting too attached to you. She feels like she's losing control as their mom. And you think this is okay? Letting her dictate who can and cannot be in their lives? This isn't about control, Jason. It's about love, and she's letting her insecurities ruin everything." Jason looked down, unable to respond. After a long silence, he mumbled, "She's the kid's mother. She makes the decisions." "Does she, though? Or have you just handed her all the power?" I shot back. He left shortly after, unable to face the truth I had laid bare. A month passed, and there was no word from Rachel or the boys. I was beginning to accept that I might never see my grandsons again when an unexpected email arrived from Rachel. It was long and, unsurprisingly, devoid of an apology. Instead, it was a list of justifications. How my overstepping was making things harder for her, how my gifts and trips were damaging her authority, and how she was only doing what was best for the kids. I closed my laptop and sat in silence, shaking my head. How had things come to this? I had been nothing but supportive, financially and emotionally, and yet Rachel saw me as a threat. I realized then that reasoning with her was futile. She had already made up her mind, and no amount of pleading or compromise would change it. The next time Jason came to pick up a check, I told him plainly that this would be the last one. His eyes widened in shock. "Mom, you can't just stop helping us. The boys' school fees." I interrupted him. "Jason, I've been more than generous, but I won't be used as a safety net while Rachel shuts me out of your lives. If she doesn't want me around, fine, but you can't have my money and cut me out at the same time." "But the kids," he started, desperation creeping into his voice. "I love those boys more than anything, but this isn't about them anymore. This is about respect, Jason, and if Rachel can't show me that, I won't continue to fund her lifestyle." He left angry and empty-handed, but I stood firm. For the first time in years, I felt like I had taken back control of my own life. In the months that followed, I heard through family members that Jason and Rachel were struggling financially. They had to pull Ethan and Caleb out of private school and transfer them to public school. Rachel apparently was furious, blaming me for their hardships. I tried to brush it off, but the guilt lingered. I missed my grandsons terribly and worried about how this was affecting them. One day, a friend of mine, who owns a local salon, called me. "Angela, you won't believe this," she said. "Rachel was here today bragging about how she'd taught you a lesson. She said she's glad the boys aren't seeing you anymore and that you were buying their love." I felt my blood boil. After everything I had done for her family, this was how she repaid me? Mocking me and twisting the narrative to make herself look like the victim? It was a low blow, even for her. Over time, I started to focus on myself. I joined a local community center and began volunteering with kids who didn't have grandparents in their lives. It filled a small part of the void left by Ethan and Caleb. I also reconnected with old friends and spent more time enjoying the simple pleasures of life on the farm. Every now and then, Jason would send me a late-night text asking how I was or if I was okay. I knew he felt torn, but until he found the courage to stand up to Rachel, there was nothing I could do. 6 months later, Jason showed up unannounced. He looked more worn down than ever. "Mom," he began, his voice heavy with defeat, "we're in trouble. The credit card bills are piling up. We can't afford the boys' extracurricular activities anymore. I don't know what to do." I looked at him, my heart aching. "Jason, I've always been here for you, but you and Rachel need to figure this out together. I can't keep enabling a situation where I'm treated like an outsider." He nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. For the first time, I saw a spark of realization. "I'll talk to her," he said quietly. "I'll try." The road ahead is uncertain, but I know one thing for sure. I deserve respect and love, and I won't settle for less. I still hold on to hope that one day, Ethan and Caleb will come back into my life. Until then, I'll continue building a life that brings me joy and peace. Family is important, but so is standing up for yourself, even when it's the hardest thing to do. It's heartbreaking to see Jason stuck in such a difficult position, especially when he seems either unable or unwilling to stand up to Rachel. His passivity only allows her insecurities to take control, and instead of having an honest, constructive conversation with you, Rachel has chosen to cut you off completely. This isn't just unfair to you, it's unfair to Ethan and Caleb, who are being deprived of the love and stability that a grandparent can bring. Rachel's behavior seems rooted in jealousy, but the way she's handling it is only creating division in the family. Jason needs to recognize the long-term damage this is causing and find the strength to set boundaries that protect your role in the boys' lives. Update 2. I tried to maintain my composure after hearing what Rachel had been saying about me at the salon, mocking my country lifestyle, claiming I was buying my grandson's love, bragging about cutting me out of the family. Her audacity was staggering. After everything I had done, financially, emotionally, and as a grandmother, this was the thanks I got. I couldn't decide whether I was angrier or more heartbroken, but as much as I wanted to confront her, I knew it would lead nowhere. Rachel had already painted me as the villain in her narrative. I could almost hear her twisting my words into more evidence of her accusations. And Jason? He would just stand there, silent as ever, while his wife dictated the terms of my access to my grandsons. I realized then that I couldn't keep letting Rachel control my emotions. Every time I dwelled on her words or missed my grandsons, I was giving her power over me. So, I threw myself into my work and community. The farm became my sanctuary, a place where I could channel my frustration into something productive. I also started volunteering at a local charity that worked with underprivileged kids. It was heartwarming to be surrounded by children who appreciated the smallest acts of kindness. For the first time in months, I felt like I was making a difference without strings attached. I even found myself laughing again, something I hadn't done since this ordeal began. About 2 months later, I was in town running errands when I ran into an old friend of Jason's. We hadn't spoken in years, but he greeted me warmly and asked how Jason and the boys were doing. I hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. "They're managing," I said with a forced smile. "It's been a little complicated lately." His expression shifted to concern. "I heard Rachel's been telling people you're cutting them off financially to control them. That doesn't sound like you." I felt my stomach drop, so the gossip was spreading further than I thought. "It's not true," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I stopped supporting them because Rachel cut me out of my grandsons' lives. I couldn't keep giving when I was being treated like an outsider." He nodded slowly. "That makes more sense. You've always been there for Jason. It's hard to believe he'd let this happen." His words stuck with me long after we parted ways. It was reassuring to know that not everyone believed Rachel's version of events, but it also underscored just how far she was willing to go to tarnish my reputation. One evening, I received an unexpected text from Jason. It wasn't his usual brief check-in. Instead, it read, "Mom, I need to talk. Can I come over tomorrow?" My heart raced as I read the message. Was this it? Was Jason finally ready to stand up for me? Or was this just another plea for money? I decided to keep my expectations low as I prepared for his visit. When Jason arrived the next day, he looked more defeated than I'd ever seen him. His eyes were sunken, and his shoulders slumped as he sat at the kitchen table. "Mom," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "I don't know what to do anymore." I didn't interrupt. I let him speak at his own pace, hoping he'd finally open up. "Rachel's spending is out of control. I'm working 2 jobs, and we're still barely making it. The boys, they've been asking about you a lot. Ethan even asked why you don't love them anymore." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Jason, you know that's not true. I love those boys more than anything." He nodded. "I know, Mom, but Rachel keeps saying that you only cared about them because you wanted control. She tells them you stopped visiting because you were mad at her." I clenched my fists under the table, furious at how far Rachel was willing to go to poison my relationship with my grandsons. "Jason, you know that's not what happened. You were there. You saw how much I cared. Why didn't you tell them the truth?" He looked down, ashamed. "I don't know. I guess I was trying to keep the peace." I took a deep breath, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Jason, keeping the peace isn't the same as doing the right thing. By staying silent, you've allowed Rachel to rewrite the narrative. Those boys are growing up thinking their grandmother abandoned them, and that's not fair, to them or to me." He nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. "I know. I've been thinking about it a lot. I want to fix this, but I don't know how." "You start by telling the truth," I said firmly. "To Rachel, to the boys, you stand up for what's right, even if it's hard." Jason wiped his eyes and nodded again. "I'll try, Mom, I promise." Jason's visit left me feeling a mix of emotions, hope, sadness, and a lingering sense of uncertainty. Would he really follow through, or would Rachel's hold on him prove too strong? Only time would tell. In the meantime, I resolved to stay strong. I couldn't control what Jason or Rachel did, but I could control how I reacted. I continued to focus on my farm, my volunteering, and the small joys in life that brought me peace. Every now and then, I'd catch myself imagining a future where Ethan and Caleb would find their way back to me. Maybe one day they'd be old enough to see through Rachel's lies. Maybe one day they'd remember the love and joy we shared. Until then, all I could do was wait and hold on to hope. Family relationships can be messy and painful, especially when jealousy and insecurity take root. But through it all, I've learned an important lesson. Love doesn't mean letting people walk all over you. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is set boundaries and stand up for yourself, even when it hurts. And for anyone else going through something similar, know this: you deserve respect and love just as much as anyone else. Don't ever let anyone make you feel otherwise. Update 3. It's been a week since Jason's latest visit, and I haven't been able to shake the image of him sitting at my kitchen table, looking so defeated. Despite my anger and frustration, there's a part of me that aches for him. He's my son, and watching him crumble under the weight of his choices and Rachel's control breaks my heart. But no matter how much I love him, I can't let that love become a license for exploitation. After Jason left, I couldn't help but reflect on how things spiraled to this point. Rachel's insistence on control and her unwillingness to compromise have caused a rift that feels nearly impossible to bridge. And Jason, he's become a shell of the strong, independent man I raised. Seeing him reduced to someone who can't advocate for himself or his children is a bitter pill to swallow. 2 days after Jason's visit, I received an unexpected text message from him. It read, "Mom, I'm sorry for everything. I know things aren't right. Can we talk again soon?" I stared at the message, unsure of how to respond. Was this an olive branch? A genuine step toward reconciliation? Or just another attempt to guilt me into relenting? I decided to give him the benefit of the doubt and replied, "I'm always here to talk, Jason. Let me know when you're ready." Before Jason could follow up, I got a surprise email from Rachel. This time, it wasn't an angry tirade or a list of accusations. Instead, it was an oddly formal message asking if I would reconsider helping with the boys' school fees. She framed it as putting the children's needs above our differences, and even added that she respected my contributions to their family in the past. But something about the email felt off. It lacked any genuine apology or acknowledgement of her role in this mess. It read more like a business proposal than an attempt at reconciliation. I didn't respond immediately. I wanted to discuss it with Jason first, as I felt it was his responsibility to address these issues directly. Jason came by later that week, looking slightly more put together than before. He thanked me for agreeing to talk and apologized again for how things had escalated. "Mom, I know Rachel's been difficult. I know you've been hurt," he began, his voice heavy with emotion. "But the boys, they're suffering because of all this. Ethan asked me yesterday if Grandma doesn't love them anymore. I didn't know what to say. Hearing that shattered me. Jason, you know that's not true. I love those boys more than anything, but I can't keep pouring myself into a relationship where I'm constantly disrespected and excluded." He nodded, tears brimming in his eyes. "I know, Mom, and you're right. But Rachel, she doesn't see it that way. She thinks you're trying to undermine her as their mom." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Jason, this isn't about undermining anyone. It's about being a family. Rachel needs to understand that my love for those boys doesn't take anything away from her role as their mother. But if she continues to cut me out, I can't just sit back and accept it." I decided to address Rachel's email directly with Jason. "She reached out to me about the school fees," I said. His face lit up, hopeful. "But Jason, the email wasn't an apology. It was a request for money. If she wants me to help, she needs to acknowledge the harm she's done. Until then, my answer is no." Jason slumped in his chair, defeated once again. "Mom, I don't know if she'll ever apologize. She's stubborn, and she thinks she's protecting the boys." "Jason," I said firmly, "protecting the boys means providing them with love and stability, not isolating them from people who care about them. You need to make her see that." He nodded but didn't say much else. I could see the wheels turning in his mind, but whether or not he'd act on it remained to be seen. After Jason left, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. I hated that the boys were caught in the middle of this mess, but I also knew I couldn't keep sacrificing my self-respect for the sake of a dysfunctional dynamic. I turned my focus back to the things that brought me peace: volunteering, spending time with friends, and tending to the farm. Slowly but surely, I was learning to let go of the guilt that had weighed me down for so long. One evening, as I was winding down for the day, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. My heart skipped a beat as I picked up. "Grandma," he said excitedly, "guess what? I got an A on my spelling test." I smiled, tears welling up in my eyes. "That's amazing, Ethan. I'm so proud of you." We talked for a few minutes before he had to go. The call was short, but it meant the world to me. It was a reminder that no matter how hard Rachel tried to keep us apart, the bond I had with my grandsons was unbreakable. As much as I hope for resolution, I've come to accept that it may not happen on my timeline, or at all. Jason has his own journey to navigate, and Rachel has her own insecurities to overcome. In the meantime, I'll continue to hold on to the love I have for Ethan and Caleb, and cherish the small moments of connection we managed to share. Family isn't always easy, but it's worth fighting for, when the fight is balanced with respect and boundaries. For now, I'll stand firm in my decision, knowing that I've done all I can. Sometimes, the best thing you can do for the ones you love is to show them how to love and respect themselves. It's disheartening to see Jason return, not to mend the relationship or take accountability, but simply to ask for financial help. This behavior reveals the entitlement that has unfortunately taken root in their lives. What's more troubling is his unwillingness to confront Rachel's actions, even after witnessing the damage firsthand. While it's understandable that he feels caught in the middle, his silence enables her behavior and perpetuates the cycle. Standing your ground is the right move here. You've shown love and support beyond measure, and it's time for Jason to take responsibility for his family and their decisions. Update 4. It had been weeks since Rachel's last email, and life had finally started to feel peaceful again. I was no longer constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next request or demand. My days were filled with productive routines, volunteering at the community center, tending to the farm, and spending time with my newfound group of friends. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living for myself, not for the constant needs of others. One evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Jason. "Mom, can we talk? I know I've let you down, but I want to try to make things right." I stared at the message, unsure of how to feel. Was this another desperate attempt to ask for money, or was Jason finally realizing the damage that had been done? After a moment's hesitation, I replied, "Okay, come over tomorrow. We'll talk." The next day, Jason arrived at the house, looking slightly better than the last time I saw him. There was still a heaviness in his demeanor, but something about his expression seemed different, more earnest. He sat at the kitchen table, the same table where so many tense conversations had taken place, and for the first time in a long time, he spoke from the heart. "Mom," he began, his voice shaky, "I've been thinking a lot about everything. About Rachel, the boys, and you. I know I've failed to stand up for you, and I see now how that's hurt not just you, but the family." I folded my hands and stayed silent, letting him continue. "Rachel's struggling to admit it, but she knows things can't go on like this. The boys miss you, and I miss you too. I've spent so much time trying to keep the peace that I didn't realize I was letting you down. I'm sorry." His words took me by surprise. For months, I had hoped for even the slightest acknowledgement of what had happened, and now it was finally here. But words, while meaningful, weren't enough to rebuild trust. "Jason," I said carefully, "I appreciate you saying that, but an apology isn't enough if nothing changes. Rachel needs to understand that I'm not the enemy. I love those boys, and I want to be part of their lives, but I won't tolerate being disrespected or treated like an outsider." He nodded, his face filled with guilt. "I know, Mom. I don't have all the answers, but I want to fix this. I'm going to talk to Rachel. I can't promise she'll come around overnight, but I'll try." A week later, I received another email from Rachel. This one was different. It wasn't just a plea for money or a veiled accusation. It was an apology. She admitted to feeling threatened by my relationship with the boys, saying she was afraid they would see me as more important than her. She acknowledged that her jealousy had clouded her judgment and caused her to act unfairly. While it wasn't a perfect apology, it didn't address everything. It was a start. I took my time crafting a response. I told her that I understood her fears, but emphasized that my love for Ethan and Caleb was never meant to compete with hers. I reiterated that I wanted to support the family, not undermine it, and that I hoped we could work together to create a healthier dynamic. Jason arranged for a family meeting at their house the following weekend. I was nervous as I pulled into their driveway, unsure of how Rachel would behave in person. When I walked through the door, Ethan and Caleb ran to greet me, their faces lighting up with joy. I hugged them tightly, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. Rachel was polite but reserved, clearly still working through her emotions. We sat down together, and for the first time in what felt like forever, we had an honest conversation. She admitted that she had let her insecurities get the better of her, and that she wanted to rebuild the relationship. I told her I was willing to meet her halfway, but that respect needed to be mutual moving forward. The weeks that followed were slow but steady. Rachel and I didn't become best friends overnight, but there was progress. She started including me in family activities again, inviting me to school events and weekend outings. Jason kept his promise to advocate for me, ensuring that my role in the boys' lives was respected. Ethan and Caleb, blissfully unaware of the complexities, were just happy to have their grandmother back. Seeing their smiles and hearing their laughter reminded me why I had fought so hard in the first place. They were worth every difficult conversation and every moment of pain. While things were improving, I knew better than to let my guard down completely. I set clear boundaries with Jason and Rachel about my involvement. I agreed to help with certain expenses like the boys' extracurricular activities, but only if our relationship remained healthy and respectful. No more enabling, no more being taken for granted. Most importantly, I held on to the independence I had rediscovered during those months apart. Volunteering, spending time with friends, and focusing on myself had become vital parts of my life, and I wasn't willing to give them up again. As I write this, I'm cautiously optimistic about the future. Jason and Rachel still have their challenges, but there's a glimmer of hope that wasn't there before. I don't know what lies ahead, but I do know this: standing my ground was the right choice. It forced them to confront their own behaviors and opened the door for change. For anyone else in a similar situation, remember this: you deserve respect, love, and a place in your family. Don't let anyone make you feel less than that. Sometimes, holding firm and letting people face the consequences of their actions is the most loving thing you can do. Your daughter-in-law's email, void of any apology, highlights the entitlement that continues to drive her actions. She tried to exclude you when it suited her, but the moment financial hardship set in, she turned to you expecting you to solve their problems. This kind of behavior is manipulative and disrespectful, especially given all you've sacrificed, emotionally and financially, for their family. Ghosting her was not only justified, but necessary to protect your boundaries. You've already given so much, and at some point, it's fair to expect accountability from both Rachel and Jason. Jason's reliance on you as a financial safety net has allowed him to avoid confronting the dysfunction in his household. For the sake of the boys and their future, he must take responsibility and advocate for healthier family dynamics. The onus is on him to address the issues with Rachel, acknowledge the damage done, and work toward genuine reconciliation. Until that happens, standing firm and valuing your self-respect is the best course of action. Have you experienced a similar situation in your family? Let us know in the comments. And remember, prioritizing your well-being doesn't make you selfish, it makes you strong.